What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. Today, we are going to be breaking down things that happened throughout this 2022 Bills season. Aaron telling us why he's going to hate watch football today. But first, our guys at Handsome Jack.
Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia worldwide with Greg Tompsett and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL. Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, along with my partner in crime, Aaron. Aaron, I'm back. I was mad. I was angry. I have processed. My head's back in the right place. I'm back.
That's awesome. I am just here so that I do not get fined. Contractually obligated.
You sound healthy and fresh.
I still am running through colds in my house. This one's not even a cold. Like, nobody's actually sick. We're all just coughing and our throats hurt. Nobody knows what's going on in my house anymore. No, it's been an interesting week, Greg. I think I too, probably more so in the times that you've known me here and that we've done this together, was impacted probably emotionally by this loss for a few days more so than the other ones that we've experienced together. But I was just saying here before we went on that with what we do and having to cover and be a fan that's emotionally invested in this, like today, I actually, all jokes aside about having to be here, I feel like I'm in a pretty good headspace with everything and being able to come on here and talk about closing this out.
Yeah, people around our neighborhood, they know what a fanatic I am. I have my flag up all the time. I wear Bill stuff all the time. So they even asked my daughter, like, "Oh, does your dad get mad after Bills losses?" And she always says, she's like, "No, not really." And it always made me proud that like I wasn't one of those guys who like punches holes in the drywall and makes a ridiculous scene for things. This game got me. I was like down and angry and frustrated, and it affected me more than realistically more than it should have as a grown man. But it did. It took me a couple days to get into a headspace where it wasn't just really making me frustrated and mad over things. And I'm still disappointed. It's still you joked beforehand where you're gonna hate watch football today. I'm still gonna watch the games today. I am.
Yeah.
I'm still gonna watch the games, but it is with a certain edge to it in there. And I realized why we didn't win last week. It's because my DeMar Hamlin hoodie didn't get here until the day after the game.
Didn't clear customs yet.
If it had cleared customs and gotten here from the Chinese manufacturer, if my DeMar Hamlin jersey or sweatshirt had gotten here in time,
had arrived. Yeah.
I think we could have pulled it
Man,
off.
if only all of our superstitions just like lined up just once for just a magic round.
One of these years.
Be all set. Yeah, no, I think there was a lot of perspective again this week for me with this team that, again, I was emotionally invested just like you. It did probably put more of a damper on me than it has in the past. And the weather probably didn't help. The weather played right in line with my emotions here all week, just gray and kind of cloudy. But as the week went on and we got to hear from the players and Sean McDermott, not so much hearing from Brandon Beane. We can talk about that a little bit more in depth too. But I did get a better feeling for how it ended. While I am angry with the end, like there's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of context, there's a lot of variables in what this wall that they hit and when they hit it. And when I was able to step back and look at it, it's like, yeah, like I can kind of understand how we got here. We probably should have seen it over the past 3 weeks, that Patriots game, the way they looked in that Miami game. We probably should have seen this was more a team like we like to talk, Greg, that heading into the playoffs, you need to be the ascending team, the team that's getting hot and putting it all together. And it felt like they had the possibility to do that. This DeMar Hamlin situation sort of happened. And that Patriots game, they barely get through that with special teams play. And then they barely get through beating the third string quarterback. You could see him just kind of running out of gas. And I think we sort of were blinded by like, hey, they can capture this moment and ride that, and all this other, them being tired and all the other adversity they faced can just get lifted by the moment. And the NFL playoffs is just too long, even though it's one game, like it's too long to sustain that type of play unless you are an ascending football team, and they just weren't. And we probably should have seen it come in, and it got punched in the face by a team that was ascending and is really good, right?
Yeah, I think, I was certainly guilty of telling myself all the reasons they could, take that step forward and and show themselves as that complete team, rather than asking tougher questions about why they haven't, and is that a concern, and where those things go. And it's one of those things that I had mixed feelings after the end of season press conferences. You alluded to it there. I thought there were some accountable statements by Sean McDermott. I didn't get a lot of that from Brandon Beane. It was oddly, they're always going to be more cliche and non-answers than what I want. It was quite a few statements that I think failed to register what I think are fairly clear and obvious challenges with this roster that need to be addressed. And it sure came across as a lot of, hey guys, we got some tough things coming up here. Don't have big expectations. And I feel like they maybe need a little more change. This is not a rebuild. This is not a tear down project. Like, there's still a ton of talent on this roster and a lot of good things, but there's some obvious flaws. And you've, started a campaign on Twitter for one of them that, he made that joke about, I want Josh Allen to have a few more bruises. Shame on the media who were there in that press conference. How was the automatic follow-up question not, well, do you think the offensive line that you put in front of him is responsible for some of those bruises?
Well, he even went a step further he took it a step further to like Josh's playing style. Like, as much as you love him, like Josh puts himself, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I actually think Josh did a pretty decent job this year. The type of hits that he took on the run didn't particularly bother me. He did a better job of trying to protect himself at times when he's out of the pocket. Those are the ones that don't tend to bother me. It's the ones that we saw rear its head in the playoffs, where he's in the pocket and that arm that he already hurt. The worst hit he took this year was the Jets reaming on his elbow and spraining his arm. That was in the pocket. That was a guy getting beat and were beat all day long. And him taking those shots. I have a ton of pictures in my campaign to protect Josh Allen where he's just in the pocket getting hit from behind and not seeing it. Those are the ones that are going to get him hurt, where he's going to fall on his shoulder, where he's going to sprain his arm. That's going to impact your season going forward. Yeah, I echo a lot of the same things that you said. I thought Sean McDermott actually was more of the open press conference this year, where in years past it was Brandon Beane being a little bit more of the open one in terms of taking some of that accountability. And Greg, you know me, I really don't care for external accountability. I don't need it in press conferences. I know some fans really want it. That's not what I need out of Brandon Beane. I said this on Spaces. The thing that frustrated me was I don't need him to come out and say whose fault it is that certain players aren't developing or anything like that. Just don't BS me. And I felt like for the first time, Brandon Beane kind of got up there and just like BS'd me about Spencer Brown and BS'd me about the bruises that Josh Allen's taken. And I think a lot of people took the response he had about the Jamar Chase comment about not sucking bad enough. I think they took that the wrong way. But my kind of point to him was like, okay, but that's a cop out because you did have a high pick. Yeah, Ed Oliver, and he has not. Like, I'm a bigger defender of Ed than maybe a lot of people, but he hasn't met up to the expectations of what a guy like Jamar Chase is.
He's inarguably the worst defensive tackle in the first round from his own draft.
For that draft, yeah, sure. And
there's like four other guys in the same first round picked after him, and all of them have been better than him.
So you don't get to just like sit up there in a condescending kind of way and be like, hey, like not everybody understands exactly what it is we do. And even to the point where he called Twitter scouts, like he called out Twitter scouts in defending Spencer Brown. And
social media scouts.
Social media scouts. Same. He was on it. He was talking about Twitter. There ain't no scouts on Facebook. No, it just felt. I love Brandon Beane, and I still trust him, and I still think Sean McDermott, and Josh Allen are the greatest thing to ever happen to us as a fan base. But in that moment, I had to listen back to it a second time because the taste in my mouth that left the first time, I was like, man, I got to listen back to that because maybe I didn't fully get the tone, or maybe I didn't pick up. And I honestly came away with like, there was condescending moments. There was moments where I thought he was like a used car salesman bullshitting me on some average beater of a car that I'm supposed to believe in is going to get me around. And so I felt frustrated with the way that press conference left.
Don't worry, they've taken it very seriously and found the person responsible for this, and they fired safety coach Jim Salgado. So obviously this is being taken incredibly seriously. On a more serious note, they did fire safety coach Jim Salgado. I know a lot of people had the immediate answer of like, hey, we've had like all pro safety play. Bobby Babich was the safety coach primarily for this stretch. This is Salgado's first year as a safety coach. I don't think anybody could have been great when at one point, I think we were playing our 6th and 7th safeties at one point.
Yeah.
So I'm going to assume, and our producer, Chris Kepner, had made a comment pre-show when we were getting ready. This is not an on-field firing. Like, he wasn't fired because, hey, look how Jaquan Johnson performed. Now, part of it might be a lack of development in some areas, but most likely that is an off-field personality, communication, chemistry firing that, hey, he wasn't a fit for what we were looking for. I don't know that there was anything on the field that was spectacular, but I thought there wasn't anything on the field that would have gotten him fired. There has to be other things we don't know about.
Yeah, this one's a tough one, right? Because it is the first year of him with the safeties specifically. And so you don't I know they wanted to develop Cam Lewis, maybe some of the lack of development from Cam Lewis in that role, but that's a short period of time. Damar Hamlin, I think, evolved nicely into the role, but before his injury was still making some same mistakes over and over again. So I don't know if there was some stagnation in his development where they saw. So it was weird to me though, because before they made this transition to him at safety coach, my thought would be if there was maybe an issue there internally that they would maybe dial back and keep him on the roster, because the way they talked about, or on the staff, the way they talked about him in terms of the development of Taron Johnson over the last few years. And when I think about Taron's importance to this defense and really the trend around the NFL, that makes me think of a guy you'd maybe want to keep. That's a revolutionary piece of your defense. He was a pretty big part of it. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if the story ever comes out. But my first thought was, when we saw that news, was like, okay, his agent leaked that to one of these people. The Bills are still going to have more to come. They just haven't been leaked yet. And so I was kind of hanging out all day, and then nothing else happened. So it was it's a little weird to me that just one thing, because I really thought we would hear maybe Eric Washington was on the chopping block a little bit more than this. This one kind of shocked me.
I didn't even
who I thought it would be.
Yeah, correct. I didn't even have Salgado on the list of people that I was looking to have replaced. Eric Washington, I think, needs to be heavily scrutinized or questioned. I have a great deal of respect for Leslie Frazier, for his career, for what he's accomplished. I think Eric, in his video breakdown, asked some fair, tough questions of, hey, has this scheme, has the offensive approach of the league evolved past where the ceiling of this scheme can get us? Obviously, the floor is very high. This scheme has an incredibly high floor. It allows us to perform well. It allows us to dominate poor competition. It destroys young and inexperienced quarterbacks.
Except for that one time with Zach Wilson this year. But yes. Sorry.
But in general, honestly, it is crazy when you look at the list of victories by the record. It's first or second year quarterbacks is something crazy 2-16, and it's Zach Wilson's one of the two. It's so weird. Anyways, we know the floor. We know it has a high floor. We know it's always going to have us towards the top of DVOA, towards the top of yards and points, and we have the talent there. But
it
over and over
keep
again,
your high variance offense in a lot of football games.
Yep. It's now been too many times here where it hasn't come up big in those big moments. It hasn't made the plays we needed in those big moments, and especially against great quarterbacks. And that's unfair, because great quarterbacks beat every defense, not just our defense. So it's not as simple as that. But I wouldn't have been upset if Leslie Frazier retired. If they talked hey, we don't want it to be released that you're being terminated here. There were some questions at one point of whether his contract had expired. That was confirmed. I think by the Associated Press that his contract has not expired. He is under contract and would need to be terminated.
Right.
So it would need to be a termination or a retirement. I would have been fine if they retire. And even if he doesn't, I think there needs to be a bit of a shakeup to find a way to introduce a greater degree of aggression in this defense, that there's just too many limitations to sitting back and playing that safe nickel shell over and over again.
I agree that I love Leslie Frazier, and I think that if there was a way to mutually part ways, I'd be cool with that. I do think that the Bills would
give him a role in the front office.
Sure,
he could still be part of the organization. He's a good human.
Or even bringing somebody up as an assistant to him that has a bigger voice in the room. And then I don't think that there's a scenario where they move on from Frazier and bring in outside. I know, like, before Fangio was linked to other jobs, people said bring in Vic Fangio. Like, that would be maybe one of the more smooth transitions in terms of like
his scheme is very similar
that you could do. But I still think that
or people would say Flores or Steve Wilkes or some other name.
These guys,
it's way more likely it would be like Bobby Babbitt Jr.
Internal Sean McDermott, I think, and Brandon Beane have drafted specifically for this scheme. I don't think they want to shift too much from that. I think they do trust the scheme. I'm in a spot, Greg, philosophically, with this defense and with this team where I'm frustrated because I don't know in these moments who is more responsible. Is it Sean McDermott? Is it Leslie Frazier? And if it is all Leslie Frazier and this moment keeps coming up again, then it's also Sean McDermott, right? Like, if he's the CEO
that's also
of this operation, it falls back to him and the buck stops there. And I think he'd be the first one to tell you that. And so I still trust in the scheme. Actually, I believe in the scheme. And it's in these moments in big games that we've seen time and time again. And this is something we talked about in the Cover One DM group a little bit the other day that I'm frustrated with is, as those moments arise, we talk a lot about player-driven leadership and trusting in your players. And when the bigger moments come, the trust seems to go away from the players and it goes to the scheme. And I don't know who leads that. Where does that drive come from? I'm not sure, but I would like to see going forward here a little bit more of that player-driven leadership, having a say in when Ken Dorsey isn't getting guys open and Dawson Knox isn't being utilized right and Gabe Davis isn't being utilized right. Like, the players being able to speak up and get that usage up right. Or in big moments with Leslie Frazier, Jordan Poyer. Like, I know that guys like those guys have to be frustrated in these moments. They're vets. They've played in this defense. They also trust in the scheme, but you're playing sort of outside yourself and not trusting your players. And I would like to see that ideology and football philosophy change. Even the Kaiir Elam situation this year, Greg, I defended Dane Jackson in the idea because I do think there's a place for adequate cornerback play in this league. But the reason I was talking about it the way I did when we were saying who was going to take over that job is I know how the Bills operate with the trusting these young players. And I thought at some point you really just have to put Kaiir in a situation where you give him the confidence. He doesn't have to earn the respect from you and earn that from you. You have to give some of these young players the confidence to go out there. You can't go out there and play scared that every time you make a mistake or every time you're out of position, then you're going to be pulled for 4 or 5 series and not be able to get back in there and get in a groove. Sometimes you have to give these young guys the confidence to go out there and play aggressive in big games and in big moments. You put out Kaiir Elam for most of his run this year in the biggest spot in the entire season, and you never gave him the confidence to go out there and do it. So something there between the players and coaches in these bigger moments, that's the spot, in my opinion, that needs to change. It's not so much the scheme or the philosophy. I think that's fine. I think it's sound. It's what are they doing blitzing Joe Burrow on third down, bringing Taron Johnson in and blitzing and leaving these guys? Like, you're getting out of yourself. You're overthinking and you're leaning too much into the scheme, and that's bad.
Yeah.
End of rant. Sorry.
No. I mean, you're spot on in that, it shouldn't need to be all those timeouts in those moments where, hey, we needed those opportunities to stop it and to get the guys into position. Well, shouldn't you trust them to be able to get into the position they need to? Should it take Stephon Diggs having to get mad at Josh Allen on the sideline? Like, shouldn't Ken Dorsey have already addressed that and been able to take care of it? I think they're fair questions. And I think that there's a valid amount of frustration from this fan base because it was a very disappointing and, embarrassing way to end the season, to get just punched in the gut over and over again and soundly beaten like that. I think it's also taken away from how much talent is still on this team next year. I think there are some very necessary issues we need to address. You and I are going to spend a ton of time researching value free agents at wide receiver and offensive line, studying in the draft at wide receiver and offensive line. We need to protect Josh Allen and we need to give him some more weapons. But if we do that, and then, getting Daquan Jones, Von Miller back, getting Micah Hyde back, like there are some things that will be addressed simply by the talent on the team. Now the questions that go along with that are, will Sean McDermott trust them to not burn or waste timeouts? Will he not be conservative in the moments where we need him to take calculated risks? I think those are two things that I now have as questions in my mind. Will Ken Dorsey take the step forward in his second year? Will giving Josh protection and some better weapons all of a sudden make Dorsey's system look better because he has people that can get separation and Josh doesn't have to take the downfield shots? And will we find a path for a greater degree of aggression and attacking style on this defense and not let the offense continually come to us? I think those are the three questions in coaching that we're right now. It doesn't look like it's going to be because of changes to the staff. It looks like it's going to have to be changes by the existing staff. And that's always going to give people hesitancy that it's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you're saying here. One thing that we got a little beat up for before Dorsey was hired in this conversation about who's going to be the next OC for Josh and this big change, right, in Josh's career after finally hitting what everybody thought he was going to be as a prospect, now having to go through an offensive coordinator change and him getting a voice in it. And I think everyone just automatically, there's a probably 50, 60 maybe % of people that I interacted with that just assumed, because of experience and playing the position and everything like that, that Ken Dorsey would go into being an offensive coordinator as a smooth transition. And my concern all along was that first year play caller in your Super Bowl window is going to take bumps and bruises along the way. And I think we saw it. I think we saw it throughout the season in that slump. I do think it got better. I think Ken Dorsey improved as the year went on. I think the offense started to find its legs a little bit, but then it also got hit in the face a couple times in the postseason too. So he took some lumps. I'm hoping that there's improvement in year two. But again, my biggest concern is, and I've tweeted this, I've talked about this a few times now, Greg, and I want your opinion where your concern level is on this. Is I'm looking through free agency and stuff. I'm trying to find guys. I hear people talking about weapons or even making a big trade for a bigger weapon. And there's this idea that it's like, at some point, how much are you making up for the wart that is your offensive coordinator? Like, I think the weapons are honestly here on the roster. Like, I'm not high on Gabe Davis, but I think he can be a productive wide receiver with consistency if used a little bit differently. Dawson Knox, I think, can be a high-end elite tight end if used in a way that is more creative and gets him the ball more often. And I think Stephon Diggs has proven for the last 5 years that he operates at the elite level of wide receiver. So I think you've got enough. James Cook, Hines, like there's a lot of mixed of weapons in here. And I just have a problem that chicken or the egg. Like, do I just continue to give Ken Dorsey these more weapons and hope that just if I overwhelm him with talent, that the talent just wins out? Or at some point, are some of these guys going to develop and he's going to utilize them to be the playmakers that we've given him to be? And that's kind of where I'm at right now, philosophically, with how do we approach this offseason? Like, does Beane try to get a big move somewhere and pull a magic out of his hat? I don't think so. I think I'm looking at maybe some lower end guys that can do the things like separate and catch, as silly as it sounds, and just hope that Josh and this offense can continue to evolve and we can develop some guys.
I do think more of it is protection and offensive line than it is weapons. But I do think that one role that you touched on is missing, in that we were missing prime Cole Beasley. Mm-hmm. We were missing a guy who could have that little stutter step option route that you didn't know which direction he's going and would just be open 90% of the time on 3rd and 4. We didn't have that guy.
Yeah, and they tried to make the security blanket the running back because we didn't have that guy, and that cocked everything up.
Yep. So I do think, there was a tweet that went out that the Raiders may be open to moving Hunter Renfrow. That got a lot of people excited because he basically is a younger Cole Beasley. Mm-hmm. He just turned 27. I'm going to be focusing on that in the draft. I know a lot of people like Zay Flowers for that reason, that he's a guy with incredible change of direction and explosiveness and actually way more high-end speed than
I'm
guys
only
like
on
Renfrow or
a
Beasley.
draft Ohio State only.
Yeah,
That's my draft theory.
we would welcome Jackson Smith and Jigba. He would be welcome to the Buffalo Bills. Shout out to Ian Harditz, who has been like manifesting that out into the universe, that he can't wait for Jackson Smith and Jigba to be a Buffalo Bill.
But is there a scenario where we just kind of don't attack that early and patchwork it with Shakir and Beasley this year instead of McKenzie and Crowder type of a thing, or even a Shakir and Crowder? I know that these aren't the conversations that fans are going to like, and I would get killed for on Twitter, but I think this is more the off season that we're anticipating, is banking on development on some of what you already invested in, and maybe they feel good about what Cole Beasley looked like inside the building for the last stretch of that season. Or maybe they feel good about how Crowder is going to recover, stuff like that. And that, hey, we can stick to the plan that we kind of had all along here.
Now, that's probably not crazy. It's going to be disappointing. There are people who are swearing in their cars right now, saying all kinds of naughty words that we would even consider this.
Yeah.
That's probably more possible than we want to admit. That I think
you're swapping out your McKenzie roles and
that it's just bringing in a different gadget guy, that, a bigger expectation of a full offseason, putting Nyheim Hines more into the offense actually is a thing. Like that's something that we absolutely could see.
Getting out of Dawson Knox, who he's
as Alan had commented here, we shouldn't be making decisions on, but Josh really likes him. There's a piece of it where we do need to give some additional weapons, especially some youth. So I do think that we see a premium draft pick, but it might not be the first round pick. It might be a second or third rounder, which is still a premium investment. I do think that we'll get other Jamison Crowder types, like where your third contract veterans who are looking to catch on with a good team. I hear risk it for the biscuit. The news just broke that the Dolphins have signed Vic Fangio as their defensive coordinator.
Good for them.
I do not love that. They already got Javon Howland and Christian Wilkins. I don't want them to have a good coach added to the mix. So we'll see where that goes. And for today, we're going to pivot to some season awards here to wrap up. For it, Aaron and I are going to be talking through all those different topics as we get ready for free agency, for re-signing guys on our own team, for looking for value free agents. And I do want to encourage you guys, we're going to need to look at value free agents. We are not going to be splurging big money out there. We're barely going to have
adequate NFL players, but this is our sweet spot. Tune in to Cover One Buffalo. This is where we love to live, man.
Wheelhouse. I will say, hey, last year, this is where we had Daquan Jones, Tim Settle. There was some, we hit on a couple of these this last year.
Yeah, and even some guys that we were into as those moderate free agents, I think went on to have good years in other spots too. I do think this is for you and I. A lot of people jump to the draft. I'm not great at the draft. I will never hide as some like draft expert, but this is actually, and the tighter we get against the cap and the more robust this depth of this roster gets year in, year out, I do think this time of year is maybe my most fun part of the offseason, Greg, is like, how do we fill? And we know Brandon Beane wants to fill as many holes as possible. And we know there's going to be some turnover with these free agents that we've got. Where do you get the value here? I love this part of the season.
Well, and how did I can't believe I forgot you even had, I think 20, I'll count it as like 24 hours of JD McKissick receipts. Like you even had that one pegged right, even though it weirdly
could have worked for me. Oh, wow.
But anyways, we'll get to a lot of that this offseason. But we did want to go through today as kind of our last putting a bow on this season with our season awards. And let's start from the bottom and go up. I guess we could start at the top.
I think you got to pay Drake rights for that, right?
Easily.
No.
Okay. No, we're.
I just don't want to get demonetized on YouTube here because we're stealing Drake's.
So we'll start with. I think a couple of these are going to be easy. It's going to be hard to be creative. There's only one answer for team MVP. I'll let you say it out loud.
Okay, because I'm going to actually shock you.
Oh, I'm ready.
Okay, because everyone's going to say Josh, and that is the correct answer. But I want to give some flowers to Stephon Diggs.
Okay.
In this scenario, because I said it earlier, he has been a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL for the last 5 years. And I think it's actually pretty difficult to do in terms of the type of talent that we have at the top end of the wide receiver pool in the NFL. It's probably the most competitive position 1 through like 32 in terms of like high end talent at wide receiver right now in the NFL. And he's the cream of the crop. He's as good as it gets, on par with Devontae Adams, on par with your Cooper Kupps, everybody in the league. And his EPA is right there.
Yeah, 108 catches, 1,429 yards, 11 touchdowns. Just a monster season. His
EPA is right there with everybody. He and Josh Allen single-handedly led this offense to be productive in almost every single offensive category, despite a below-average offensive line and lacking utilization of other players. I think they dragged Ken Dorsey into some job interviews this year. Like this is how special and good this unit is. And I just didn't want to just give it to Josh because he does deserve it. And I will give another award here to Josh, but Diggs also has come in and really been a part of the change of culture. Like the Bills needed a culture change, and so did Diggs. And I know people were frustrated with him this last week, but I wanted everyone on the Buffalo Bills sideline to be as mad as Stephon Diggs was in that moment, because I was, right. Like, and I've never played competitively at the level that these guys do, but in everything that I was competitive in, man, the feeling of losing sucks. So I get it. And so I wanted to give Steph some flowers here. So he's my team MVP for this 2022 season, because he's had a real special run here with us, and I think that matters.
Yeah, I think arguably you could say his 3 seasons with the team have been the 3 best receiving seasons in team history. It's
I think
incredible.
He's the best receiver to be a Buffalo Bill. I've said that before, and I'll fight anyone in YouTube or Twitter comments that wants to argue that.
I know usually it's Andre Reed hate. You got some interesting Eric Moulds hate.
There's a lot of Eric Moulds hate and Andre Reed hate, and I understand.
We're both studs. Like Andre Reed's a Hall of Famer. Eric Moulds should be a
Diggs in the 90s against those corners. I don't care if they could touch him; they wouldn't be able to touch him. The athlete he is, just translates across.
Yeah. So I'll give the correct answer. The team MVP is Josh Allen.
Yeah.
And it's a great example where he was, maybe a little bit disappointing this year, and people, kind of ended up being like, was it really that good? He had 4,283 yards, 35 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, ran for 762 yards and 7 touchdowns. He had 270 yards and 50 yards rushing every game. It's absurd. Like he's now, the bar is so high that we're disappointed because it's only 270 yards and 50 touchdowns. And you had 2 more interceptions than Burrow and 1 more interception than Patrick Mahomes. Like, it's just, he's unbelievable. And that, I think we've seen that, mega star Josh Allen in periods and stretches. This year we saw it to open the season in the first 5 games, and then it kind of tailed off. And obviously the UCL injury was a factor, but as long as we have Josh Allen, we're going to have a chance to have special teams, and he's going to keep this team special.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that that's where you went with your offensive player of the year, and I did the same.
I didn't want to give the same award to 2 people because I've done this like almost every year the last couple of years too with Josh. So yes, I did give this to Josh just because he's the ultimate weapon, right? Like he is the straw that stirs the drink. Or don't do anything without him. He is also the MVP. You're right.
So now there's a little bit more intrigue here, although we're probably going to have the same answer here as well. Defensive player of the year.
Yeah, I go with Jordan Poyer here. Okay. For me specifically, not necessarily. I don't think he actually maybe had the best year defensively, but I think that he represents sort of the team as a whole this year, and representing like just kind of having to find a way all season long. And I don't think there's any individual player maybe that faced more adversity than Jordan Poyer this year, going into the season, now knowing your future of your contract, playing without
extending your elbow in camp.
Yeah, like everyone assumes that no matter what happened to Jordan Poyer's season this year, that it would end with him getting a big contract. But that actually is probably not likely the case. Like there's a lot of scenarios where this ends with him, and he had multiple opportunities here this year where he got hurt and could have been season type ending. He might still have to get some types of surgeries to repair some of the injuries that he dealt with, which could impact some of his value.
When you're 32, if you have a season ending injury, it is very impactful in your free.
Well, especially if you can't maybe play early in training camp with a new team and get in that system. So like there was some risk on his, before he even stepped foot in training camp at just St. John Fisher, that he was facing adversity. And then, all the injuries, the piles of injuries, Micah Hyde's injury, obviously a huge, Micah talked about it in his wrapping up the season. One of his biggest regrets was not being able to play with Jordan so that he can increase Jordan Poyer's value to get paid, because he knew them playing together is something that's so special. So the rotation of other safeties at this spot, the struggles on the defense and him being a captain on this defense, sort of keeping it together and keeping it patched all season long and playing hurt and bandaged. Just, I had to give him the award here because he just put it all out on the field for the Bills and really against his own self-interest.
So super well deserved. I think was one of my, kind of three players that I debated here. I really almost went with Tremaine Edmonds because I think you can make an argument that he had a very impactful season. He had his best season by far, but I went with Matt Milano. I think Milano was a stud and had, whatever it is, he's not perfect. He does get washed out sometimes. He's not always perfect with tackling. There's, a few more missed tackles than I would like. But his ability to consistently make those big splash plays, the 12 tackles for a loss, 3 interceptions, including taking back one for a touchdown, had 2 fumble recoveries, had 2 sacks, plus the 100 tackles and all the other things that go along with it. 7 quarterback hits along with the 2 sacks and all those different things. He's just consistently impactful in the way that this defense is set up. He deservedly got first team All-Pro. I thought that was awesome to have that recognition out there, that other people see how big of an impact he's having. And, he really gives them so much opportunity. I think there are some things he benefits from having Tremaine Edmonds next to him, because they ask Edmonds to do a lot more, to have a lot more responsibility in the scheme that lets Milano play free and aggressive the way that he does. And I'm curious if they're not able to bring back Edmonds, and you guys will see my contract projection soon, and I will be predicting that we do keep him, but it's not a guarantee, and it's not just up to the Bills.
His team played that pretty well this year.
Yeah, his agents going in here to the 5th-year option with no extension, banking on him having his best season. And
I'm certain Brandon Beane put a contract in front of their face this summer at some point of what their value was, and they said no problem.
Yeah, we're gonna test it out, and they were right to do so, because now I don't know that he gets the full Roquan Smith deal, but he's going to get close, and it's going to be upsetting for fans. He's going to get more than CJ Mosley got from the Jets, and that before seemed like a pipe dream to be that high. So
hopefully that YouTube contract is hefty.
There you go. So EB, I love that one. Daquan Jones, super sneaky one that, but maybe not actual defensive player of the year, but super, super impactful. That's a good one. All right, let's move our way down. How about for coach of the year?
Coach of the year. This one's a hard one usually every year because it's going to be McDermott. I almost didn't give it to McDermott. I almost went with Smiley for having a first year top place special teams.
I went off the board. Yeah.
But I am going to go back to Coach McDermott, not because of the end of the results, because I'm not happy with him right now with the taste in my mouth of this team right now, but the amount of adversity that we were talking about 6 weeks ago and praising this guy for he should be the coach of the year, and hearing the way the players talked about that they never felt more that he should be the right coach for this team. Like, I don't know anyone that's faced that kind of adversity in a single season, and the way he did it and the grace and the humility and all the things that he did. Whether or not he gets us to the Super Bowl, I don't know if that'll happen, but he's the best leader of an organization that I've seen in my lifetime for any of the sports teams that I follow. And so it was on full display this year. And so kudos to him.
Very well deserved. Definitely there. I know, again, it's hard to get past the frustration of how the season ended. And he certainly did not have his best performance in that last playoff game. But I think the leadership he showed is worth it. I'm going to give some flowers to Bobby Babbitt Jr. I think that both linebackers having the best season of their career in his first season as the linebacker coach. It's a pretty cool nod. They moved him from safety to linebacker, and then they had to fire the safety coach. So, I think he is a future defensive coordinator in this league. I actually won't be upset at all if he's the future defensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills. I think he's a bright, up-and-coming football mind. Obviously, his dad was here for a long time, and sometimes you get the weird nepotism, like in New England, where it looks like the one son's doing drugs most of the time. This one is more the Kyle Shanahan type, where you get a really bright, capable guy who also now has lived and breathed football since he was
And I
a
think
kid
that's
and
why
came up with that.
Bob, his father, stepped down
I
was
don't
to
disagree.
get out of the way for his son, because I think he was ascending into his own career here a little bit.
I think he saw that he had a chance to be special and to have that path, and good for him for seeing that. Good for him for
Getting his
raising
own
him
ego
that
out of the
and-
way.
Yeah. God
That's
bless
hard
him.
to do.
How about for rookie of the year?
Here I went Cook. I do think we probably could add a better case if some other guys got a little bit more of the production that we anticipated they would. But Cook was the only one to me who every time I saw him get out there, it seemingly was always improving, right? Like it always seemed like it was getting better, always finding more of a rhythm. And probably the one I'm most excited about if I'm wrong and Ken Dorsey can develop, or the coaching staff can develop players, I really don't know where his ceiling can be as a runner, because some of the things that I thought were flaws coming out of the draft in that process, I've seen huge improvements and huge strides in for him going forward. So I'm really excited to see where he looks next summer and going in, and how this offense is going to use him going forward. Because I do think, a lot of has been made about the Bills not having the type of weapons that the 4 teams that we're going to watch today remaining have. And I don't believe for a second that that's actually true. And I think his development and Shakir's development, guys like that I believe in, will be a big part of proving those receipts for me right next year, hopefully.
I think Spin is right here. I think if they had let Elam play all season, he would be the rookie of the year, but they didn't.
Benford would have been interesting if he didn't get hurt. Like he was playing very well.
Maybe he would have taken that job and run with it. We'll talk about that in some coming shows, that I think there's some tidbits about whether Benford moves to safety or not that I think we should read into a little bit. I think that Khalil Shakir still has a very bright future, and that we could be really excited about him moving forward. But I do think that it's really hard not to pick James Cook. He had the most impact, had the most opportunity, and did well with it. And I think he might have ended the season with the best yards per carry of any running back in the league. He was right there with Tony Pollard down the stretch. So I didn't look at the final standings. I can check that out here. So I think that one deserves to be there. A couple here that are just kind of some superlatives that we'll kind of wrap things up with. Who do you put as the most improved player?
So here was, you had a defensive player or in the running for defensive player of the year here. I got Tremaine Edmonds. I think it's the way he improved with Zaquan Jones and maybe Babbage also into getting himself into turning over so many haters. I think that's the real improvement, is you saw a lot of people really come around to the idea that, we probably are going to pay more than we want to, but he is a key cog of what we're trying to do.
Well, and it was such an enormous, noticeable difference anytime he was out of the game, that you just saw a huge drop off. And that we'll talk about it when we get to free agency, because we owe it to ourselves to look for alternatives, because it's possible that his agent just says, nope, we want 6 years and 120 million, and the Bills aren't, might say, yeah, we can't do that. So we have to be prepared for that, but it's something that we need to watch for. And I did look it up. He did end the season. He technically, James Cook did not make it on the list because he didn't end up enough carries to qualify, but he did have he had the most yards per carry. It was him and Khalil Herbert from the Bears.
Makes sense.
So, most improved was a tough one, but I'm going to go with one of your favorite guys here. I thought Taron Johnson really had a bigger step forward than people realized, because he had always had the flash plays, but he had maybe some issues with consistency, that he wasn't always there, especially in coverage. And he really, really stepped forward this year. And I think really put his name out there as, one of the best nickel cornerbacks in the NFL. And I think that he's a guy maybe kind of like Milano, where we were a little ahead of the curve on realizing it, and then other people started to notice and give him more attention. I think next year we could see more of that discussion with Taron Johnson as, outside of the Bills circles, people talking about him as the best nickel in the league.
That again also probably faced a lot of adversity with rotation at cornerback too. There's a lot of communication there. Obviously the rotation at safety. Tons of communication there. Linebackers both had issues where they were in and out of the lineup at times. And I believe in terms of defense, that's the hardest thing to do right now, is to be a nickel defender in terms of what lining up, how wide receivers line up, who they line up at wide receiver, the amount of space you have to cover in zones, and the amount of people you have to communicate with. And again, each year he's getting better. I like that, man. Thanks for giving my guy some flowers.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I like it. How about for best addition?
This one I think is slam dunk Daquan Johnson. I think that it changed everything. You saw the gravity, and we've talked a lot about the linebackers. I think it's not a coincidence. I think that there was probably the biggest missing piece in terms of it wasn't
everything
a long-term
the star
injury.
was supposed to be.
Yeah, and it was the biggest missing piece, and why the physicality I think lacked in that Bengals game. In the middle of that defense for that Bengals game, missing him and playing with a one-armed Jordan Phillips was just too much to overcome. But I think that getting that one tech position right showed you that if you get that right, what it can actually do for freeing up those real athletic linebackers, and then what they can really look like. An all-pro. Imagine that. You can get an all-pro when you get a real one tech.
Yeah, it's amazing. The internet's gonna make fun of you because you said Daquan Johnson.
Jones, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, the internet's always very, calm and forgiving.
I have a lot of names up on my screen, so they can come at me.
That is a fantastic choice. I do want to say, I think Von Miller was everything we wanted him to be. I think there's some hindsight BS that people are throwing at Brandon Beane, like, oh, look, the guy you signed got hurt, so now it's a terrible contract. Well, that's not how this works. Like, any player that gets hurt, it impacts the value of the contract. He was playing. He was on pace for 13 or 14 sacks. He was making, not only getting sacks, a ton of them were really impactful. In the moments, just sealing that Chiefs game. And that, I have no idea. The Bengals were playing hot. We weren't playing that well. But you can't tell me that if we had Daquan Jones and Von Miller in that game, that there wasn't a good chance it would have been different. Like that they could have made some of those plays when we needed to.
And if you had Daquan Johnson in there too.
Yeah, if you had Daquan Johnson.
All three of those guys.
If you had Daquan Johnson, now we were really cooking with gas. The internet tells me cooking with gas is bad, so I probably shouldn't use it anymore. So I think that those two right there, Daquan Jones and Von Miller, were, deserving of that. And, I think also a good reminder that, hey, Brandon Beane is getting some deserved criticism because he's not the flawless gunslinger god that people had built him out to be. He's just a really good GM, but guess what? He's still a really good GM. Like he still drafted Josh Allen. He still signed multiple good signings. Daquan Jones and Von Miller more than anything else. But even, he got back Shaq Lawson for the veteran minimum. Shaq Lawson was better than a veteran minimum player. Jordan Phillips had moments. He got hurt, and then the one-armed Jordan Phillips wasn't the same at the end of the season. Tim Settle was a nice rotational piece. Yeah. But, he's not flawless. And part of that comes into our last category here. Who is your biggest disappointment?
This is the Roger Saffold Award for me. I didn't have a lot of expectation here, right? Like I just wanted to be at like a little slightly above average interior offensive lineman is what I was looking to get to, and I think we were right back to below average, and even if not, probably worse than John Feliciano at times with Saffold this year. And that was a huge disappointment because that one was also like, all right, we got Cromer. This is a Cromer guy. This is something that's going to change the way we play on the offensive line, the type of athletes we want. And it really didn't do anything. And so I'm willing to give Cromer more time to get this right, but I hope that they get him some of the right pieces. I'm really starting to get concerned. This is the one maybe blind spot that I'm struggling to see if Brandon Beane can find. I know we talk a lot about the edge and not drafting the right edge guys, but whether it's in free agency or through the draft, he has not done a good job. I like Mitch Morse, and I do like Deion Dawkins. I can't give him credit for Dawkins necessarily, but outside of Mitch Morse, I can't give him a ton of credit on these guys yet on the in the trenches, but mostly on the offensive line. So we'll see. But Saffold, big disappointment for me.
Yeah, the crazy part is the bar wasn't that high for Saffold. Like when we signed him, I talked myself into like, okay,
weak link, fine.
He's historically been a good run blocker, and maybe our scheme can protect him as a pass blocker, but he's been really rough as a pass blocker. So hopefully we can survive through this. And I thought maybe adding David Questenberry would help a little bit more. I was excited about Bates coming back, and I think Bates is okay. I think Bates would be okay as your worst starter.
Yeah.
It's not feasible for him to be your third best and to be 3 out of the 5. I think that I think guys like Spencer Brown and Ned Oliver both deserve some mention as big as disappointment, because I think we were maybe looking for Spencer Brown to take a bigger step forward in year 2, and that, hey, now having some time, but again, he had the off-field injury stuff, or the off season, came in with a back injury, couldn't practice most of camp. Now all of a sudden we had to put him into the last minute where he didn't really get any reps through camp and preseason. So, I mean, I don't know if anybody remembers, we didn't even know if he was going to start in the week in the season opener because he hadn't played at all. Ed Oliver, I expected to take a big step forward. I expected him to show, hey, I'm one of these top defensive tackles, and he's good. He's good. Like, he's not. This is a disappointment because my level of expectation was so high. But when you're picked 9th overall and you're picked ahead of Jeffrey Simmons, and you're picked ahead of Brian Burns, and you're picked ahead of some other stud, Christian Wilkins, and some other stud defensive linemen who are playing great, there's some expectation here that you are going to make an impact. So I would put both of them there, but I agree. My biggest disappointment is Roger Saffold.
Yeah, another honorable mention might be Isaiah McKenzie this year. For most disappointing.
Maybe not for you and I, because
I don't know though, Greg. Because I'm not a fan of his game, but in August he convinced me to take back some of what I said about him, and there was this idea that he was going to elevate the slot, and we have just as many questions today as I had about the slot going into training camp a year ago. So I think that maybe he should also be up there in consideration.
So here, just a completely off topic, because Roy brought it up here, and it matches with a conversation we've been having in our Cover One staff chat, which, if anyone's not aware, like that, the Cover One staff chat's like the best content on the internet, and only like 15 people get to see it. It's fantastic. Right now, if the Las Vegas Raiders called you and offered Hunter Renfrow straight up for Ed Oliver, what would you do? And I'll let you know, the contracts are almost identical. They're almost exactly the same. They're both about $11 million. So there'd be no net cap impact.
I mean, I would take Hunter Renfrow, but like, how often do you just like straight up player trades?
They don't. I love this. Like, immediately, one all caps no followed by an all caps yes.
Yeah. I mean, I like Ed Oliver, I think, more than a lot of people do at this point. I'm seeing a lot of Ed Oliver hate. I think your take on it is right. Like, he's good. And I've seen him wreak havoc at a lot of times where he does a lot of
multiple times. I've been convinced, here it comes. This is going to be the dominant stretch from Ed Oliver, and then he disappears.
And he hasn't turned into exactly what we want him to be, but so I'm in on him a little bit more. But yeah, I think if you had a chance to, I think Renfro's also special. I think he's a young Cole Beasley. I think he's a young Cole Beasley that has a lot more opportunity to make a huge impact on the game earlier on than Beasley was able to do. I think it would be a special relationship here to get a guy like that. So I would do it. But it is building, that's a hole now this offseason where that kind of like penetrating interior defensive lineman now becomes maybe more of a thing. Like, interior pressure still matters the most to me. That's where I want to get it from. And so, yeah, I would then turn my prioritizing to that, which I think that's fine. I haven't looked at the class this year to see how that looks, but free agency right now does not look great to bring in a penetrating D-tech defensive 3-tech type guy.
Yeah. And I mean, it's hypothetical. It's not real. I don't actually think the value is far off. I actually think that both teams would have a meeting about it. Both teams would sit there, and front offices would go, well, what do you know? I mean, what do you think? Is that I think both temes would talk themselves into why it could be a possibility.
You might have to toss Gabe in there or something.
Dude, the internet's going to get so mad at you. So one, it leads into your protect Josh Allen, because we need a guy on 3rd and 4 that can get open. And let me tell you, Hunter Renfrow can get open. That boy can run a route. He also catches everything every single time. Ridiculously amazing hands. Is actually, as far as non-rookie contracts, it's a pretty doable contract. An awful lot of receivers are getting $15, $20, $25 million. He's got 2 years at 11 million. It's a decent value. So I don't think it's not going to be at Oliver. I actually think there's a non-zero chance that we do pick up the phone and see like, hey, what are you looking for Renfrow? I have a feeling it's going to be like a second round pick. Maybe I think you could try an early third round pick, but we would get beat by other teams. We'd probably have to do our late second to beat the other team's early third. Or maybe, conditional pick kind of thing.
Right.
I also think the fact that he's 27 and going to play this year at 27, he'll turn 28 in the playoffs next year. So you're getting him for year 27 and 28. You could easily do a 2-year extension for season 29 and 30 and decrease his early cap hit. So that's my pipe dream early on. The fact that tweet came out saying that the Raiders are listening to offers is going to ruin me all the way through free agency. So we'll have a lot of time to go through with everybody, players that we can re-sign. If you guys want to send me some tweets on guys that you want to see contract projections on. Aaron's already asked me for a couple. I'm going to start getting going on that. We've got a new stat visual guy who's helping us out from a data standpoint. He's building me a contract projection template that's going to be pretty cool. So I can put those out and start to share those. So anybody that's a free agent that you'd like to see what my projection is, or guys, I'm obviously going to do the top 10 or 12 of the Bills free agents of what I would project them to be. So we'll be working through that over the next couple weeks here. And tomorrow I leave to join our guys down in Mobile, Alabama. So me, Eric Turner, Anthony Prohaska, David Fox, our new intern, AJ Cebulski, and Russ Brown are all going to be meeting down there and covering the Senior Bowl all week long, sending you guys videos of the breakdowns. I'll be paying a lot of attention to offensive linemen and wide receivers while we're there, and maybe some safeties, but those are going to be my primary areas of focus there. So a lot of good things going on and a lot of excitement happening.
Yeah, I'm bummed I'm not going to make it down to the Senior Bowl this year, but I'm looking forward to all you guys sort of reporting back to me. This is the start of really the off season for me, right? Breaking down, getting to this point, putting the bow on our season, doing our show, and now I transition into sort of the same work you're doing, digging through that bottom barrel of free agency. But really, the draft process for me starts at the Senior Bowl. We know how much Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott prioritize seniors, the guys that have been through a full 4 years. They like that. They like that type of leadership. And we've seen them take a lot of players with their high picks from the Senior Bowl. So this is where I think really, not to pat ourselves on the back too much as a whole team. I think we do a really good job, Greg, you and I, with the free agency stuff. And I think the whole team does a great job with the whole offseason in general. Like, we have a ton of guys.
So many guys with their niche.
Love the draft and break into it. And Eric is going to find 5 or 6 gems that belong on the Buffalo Bills roster and they're perfect fits. And I don't know if the Bills are going to take them or not, but you're only going to find out if you're involved in following our content. So make sure everybody maybe we'll put out a follow train tweet, because we've got so many new guys on our staff. But this offseason, make sure if you aren't following the whole team, make sure you're on it, because everybody's got these good little nuggets in their niches that when it comes together, it is like a Voltron of just perfect Bills offseason content for you. So I'm excited to start to dig into how we can make these improvements of the things we talked about here today, Greg.
Absolutely. We got a string of some decent questions here, so I'm going to try to do a rapid fire from the comments real fast. Dylan, Burrow does just fine with mediocre O-lines. Why is that? It's because it gets rid of the ball fast. That's it.
And I got a good take on this.
Dan Marino and Peyton Manning used to do it forever. They hit bad offensive lines by getting rid of the ball fast.
Getting rid of the ball fast, having really elite wide receivers that are catching the ball, again, separation, those all help. Also, I think that there was a lot of this made over the past week that Burrow had not starting offensive linemen and that Josh Allen did. I will tell you right now, I think that 3 maybe of the Bills offensive linemen probably don't necessarily qualify as starting offensive linemen in the NFL. So all season long, Josh Allen was playing with a below average, not starting offensive line. Technically, the Bills just called them starters.
Yeah. Just because we started them doesn't mean they're starters. Josh, is this the most important offseason for this regime? Every offseason is the most important for every regime. The NFL is a year-by-year league. Anybody can get fired. It's just how it works.
I do think, unless I'm still at a point, Greg, I don't know where you are, unless the wheels fall off this next season and like a total disappointment train wreck with Josh Allen as your starter, I'm still a full year away from starting up the hot seat for these.
I'm not even
power structure.
If we have another wild card or division round exit,
that's when I'm starting
this coming year. Then that will start the hot seat that the next year they would be under pressure.
Yes.
If they don't make the playoffs in a Josh Allen healthy season, then I'll have those discussions because then
Maybe we
something
can
went
entertain it.
truly off the rails. Yeah.
Yep.
Lauren said she noticed that scoring the most points usually equates to wins. So I like that. That's spot on.
I do like points.
So BTMS is, so we're saying that Gabe David and Stephon Diggs aren't great weapons and suck, dude. Yes, that's exactly what I said.
I think I actually said not that. I think I said the opposite like 4 times in the show. I've been saying it the whole time that I think our weapons compete with any of the 4 you're going to watch today.
You named it P MVP, which is basically sucking. Reg here saying, how can we get DeAndre Hopkins? We can't. His contract.
I don't want him, to be honest. I sound like I want more nice things. Like, that's cool, but I don't think he's the answer. He's not for the questions I have.
Yeah. If you told me straight up you could either have DeAndre Hopkins or Brandon Cooks, I would just take Brandon Cooks. Like, DeAndre Hopkins doesn't add what we need. You could then like make Diggs the slot. Sure. I don't know. Yeah.
Greg, do you think Beane will ever use the franchise tag, or is that just something he doesn't believe in?
Maybe Tremaine Edmonds. So this is a good example. This is not a great situation to use a tag, but one where we would like to. Unfortunately, because guys like Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack and Matt Judon are counted as linebackers because they're edge rushers, the linebacker franchise tag this year is $20.9 million. Not only is it $20.9 million, even if you pay Tremaine Edmonds a 5-year, $100 million contract, which is what Roquan Smith got. I'm not going to project that. I don't think it's going to be that much. Even if you do that, you can make the first year cap hit like $8 or $10 million if you want. We gave Von Miller 6 years, $120 million. His first year cap hit was $5 million. Right. We can do anything that we want. When you franchise tag, all $20.9 million counts this year. So I guarantee, I shouldn't say that. I will be shocked if Tremaine Edmonds gets franchise tagged. It's technically possible. I will be shocked if they franchise tag him. Now, ever is different. So the Giants could franchise tag Saquon Barkley because the running back franchise tag is only like $8 million. There are scenarios where the franchise tag actually
safety probably wouldn't be a bad one, but he's not going to do that to Jordan Poyer.
Correct. I think that would be, matter of fact, I will even say there was probably a handshake deal that when he stopped his maybe mini hold in, that they agreed not to franchise tag. Yes. I would not be shocked if that just wasn't reported, but that there was a handshake deal. Like, listen, I'm going to come and be a good soldier. I'm going to be the leader you want in this locker room. You got to promise me you're not going to franchise tag me next year.
Because it's probably not favorable for safety.
Yeah, correct. It's not great. It's not great. It's like 11 and change, maybe 12. So it's not terrible.
Where you will see it will be a younger player that they can't maybe afford to get a deal done with, that they just want to ramp up. I don't think they'll do it to an older player like in a Jordan Poyer type situation. I think they have respect for where guys
I'll give you one. Careers. How about this year in the 5th year, Ed Oliver has a breakout 15 sack season. And all of a sudden we're like, hey, is that real? Or was that just a contract year blow up? And he wants $25 million a year. And they're like, nah, we're not doing that. That's the scenario where like, hey, we're not sure if this is real. This is a 1-year kind of thing. Some people are probably saying in their minds that that's Tremaine Edmonds. I would disagree. I think Tremaine's first 4 years were better than Ed's first 4 years we've seen now. And then he had the breakout 5th year. So I think Ed is an example where it could make sense if he has a huge breakout 5th year next year where we can't afford him.
Yeah.
But, all right. I think that's it. Anything
more questions here? I got nothing, man. Enjoy. I think if you're still mad, take some time, realize where we are at in terms of NFL fan bases. I think you said it really good right after the game, and I've been echoing it. A lot of teams would love to be in the position where you had Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott, Josh Allen, Terry Pagula giving you all the resources you need. I think we're still in a good spot. I do think lost in the Brandon Beane press conference a little bit with some good perspective, though. Like, it isn't as far out. It isn't as bad as it feels. He had a lot of moments of really good perspective of where things are with this team. And I still feel good. I still feel confident. I still believe in the plan. I still trust the process. And I hope you guys do too. And hopefully we can refine it all here throughout the off season.
Absolutely. Hey, I'll say, if anything, I think that this may have been just painful enough of an ending that maybe we see a few more tweaks, a few more changes, a few more scheme adjustments than we would have. Whereas last year, basically everything showed, hey, we were this close. We were probably the best team. Let's run it back exactly the same as what we had. Maybe this is going to trigger some more difficult internal discussions. Maybe we won't see it until the games start, but maybe this will give the impetus that we needed to be able to make some additional changes. I certainly hope so. I hope that the pain that we experienced, the frustration and anger that we experienced, I'm sure was, 10 times more by the guys who live and breathe it every day in that building, and that they're going to do what's necessary to be able to go through this. So appreciate it here. Looking forward to meeting up with the guys here. Watch for all of our content. We have a couple different things. Eric Turner, I think you put it out from the Cover One handle. We created a list you can follow on Twitter that has all the guys that are down there that'll be putting out stuff. We also are going to be using a hashtag that's hashtag Cover One Senior Bowl. So if you just search on Twitter, hashtag Cover One Senior Bowl, you'll find all of our videos and tweets and pics and everything that's going on there. Should be an awesome experience to share with everybody, and looking forward to bringing it all to you this whole week. And then we will either next weekend or possibly starting up the Wednesday after, Aaron and I will get back to our normal schedule and be back here with you guys throughout the rest of the offseason.
At some point, things will be normal again.
Maybe.
Yeah.
All right, man. On behalf of our awesome producer, Chris Kepner, and Aaron Quinn, I am Greg Tompsett. You have been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and